Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have the second half of my recent reads extravaganza. That's not the right word, but never mind. So I mentioned in my last recent reads video that I'd finished a lot of books between being able to film, but I didn't want that video to be massively long, so I'm talking about the next 6 books that I read recently today. If you haven't seen that video and you want to go and check it out, I will leave a link for that below for you. But without much further ado, I'm going to get into the books. There are a few books here that I read for uni that I'm not going to go into very much detail about, and then some of the others I'll talk a little bit more about, so we'll see how we get on. Okay, so the first book I'm going to talk about today, actually looking at it, this is quite a non-fiction heavy recent reads, so let's just get on with it. So the first book that I finished is Delusions of Gender by Cordelia Fine. So I was buddy reading this with my friend Penny. She'd suggested it because she really wanted to read it. Actually, she's been in a bit of a reading slump, so I think she's only about halfway through, but she did give me the go ahead to get on and finish it because she knew I was keen to get through it and pick up some other stuff. So you can see on the back here I've got some little post-it notes with all my notes so that we can talk about it. We talk on the phone about once a week, and if we've both managed to read some, then we have a little bit of a chat about some of the themes that come up in it. It's a science book, but it's pretty readable about gender and about where our ideas of gender come from. So she talks quite a lot about psychology and some psychological theories to do with gender, and she also delves into neuroscience and kind of some of the work that's being done in that field, but also how that data is generally being misrepresented in the media to emphasise the differences that she doesn't feel are quite as set in stone as they're made out to be. So she talks a lot about how people say these things are neurologically hardwired, but she said that's not actually a thing because our neuro pathways develop all the time. So it's very difficult to say that certain things are genetically, neuroscientifically different about male and female brains. She said there's just not enough evidence, particularly because papers that don't show a difference in gender don't tend to mention it. It will be more like they're looking for something else and they happen to see if there's a difference between male and female participants in the studies. If there isn't, they don't mention it in the study, but if there is, then they do mention it. So it kind of builds up this idea that there are neurological differences that aren't necessarily there. So she talks a bit about that. That was the middle section, which I found the hardest going, but was still pretty well explained for someone that doesn't know a lot about neuroscience. The beginning and final sections were more about the psychological impact of some of these things. So she talks about stereotype threat, which is where people can only see negative stereotypes of their group, their social group. So whether that's primarily, she talks about it as a gender thing, but she also mentions things like people from ethnic minorities and how that can affect them. And it kind of leads into things like imposter syndrome, where people feel like they don't belong because they're not like the other people in the group, in the room. She talks about how women have only recently been allowed into spaces that have been traditionally considered male. So she talks a lot about the sciences and business worlds, and talks about how these worlds are still being designed to exclude women. One thing that really struck me and made me a little bit cross was she talks about business meetings taking place in strip clubs and that kind of thing, and how that is designed to promote this boys club and exclude women. And then the last section, she talks more about gender neutral parenting and why that is laughed at, but why actually it's much harder than it seems to make happen, and how our presuppositions about gender are so ingrained that even when we think we are acting in a gender neutral way towards children, we actually aren't necessarily. So she looks into quite a lot of that. I found it really, really interesting, really readable. She's quite snarky about some of the stuff that she's writing about, particularly when she thinks people haven't carried out their scientific studies in a very robust way. So I found that really funny. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I read quite a lot of stuff about feminism, particularly from a theological perspective, so it was really good to read something from a more scientific perspective, and I do recommend it. I actually gave it 5 stars. I thought I'd given it less than that, but I gave it 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. Yeah, definitely recommend that one. Next, I'm very quickly going to talk about 2 books that I read for uni. So one was called The Psalter Reclaimed. My copy of this is in my study because I need it for an essay I'm working on at the moment, so I read this for my Psalms class. I'm writing on an essay about lament in the Psalms at the moment. This was really interesting. It looked at kind of different themes in the Psalms Psalms, how the study of the Book of Psalms in the Bible has developed. It was one that was on our reading list for class, so we read some of it and talked about some of the chapters in class, and so I just carried on and finished reading that, and it was pretty good. I gave it 4 stars and quite enjoyed it. Not gonna say any more about that because it was for class. And then the next one likewise was for class, so this was A Theology of Liberation by Gustavo Gutierrez. I've been reading this on and off since the autumn, actually a little bit longer than that, because I think I first picked it up when I was studying theology before and I never quite got around to finishing it, and then I picked it up for one of my classes in the autumn when I was writing an essay on liberation theology, and I've been gradually working through it. It's quite dense and it did take me a little while to get through, but I found it really interesting. It's kind of a seminal work in this area of theology. There are a couple more introductory level ones. If you're interested in liberation theology, I can let you know about them. Yeah, so this just looks at how liberation theology developed in South America, when liberation theology is about like how the gospel is relevant to people who are living in poverty or under oppression, and how we need to reclaim some of those themes and to make the gospel more relevant and open to them. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The next book that I finished was kind of another one for uni, but slightly different. So this is David M Batuba by Roberta Kelsdor. You may remember that my current programme of study, I was originally doing another MA in theology, and I bought a few books and novels, this is a novel, about these characters, because my MA dissertation I was going to be writing this year was about the representation of the character of Bathsheba in novels. So there's been quite a lot of development since then. I'm now not doing an MA this year, I'm just doing a postgraduate diploma, and my proposed dissertation topic has now become my proposed research topic because I've been accepted onto the research programme at college to start in the autumn. So it's expanded slightly. I'm either going to be doing a research master's or a PhD depending on what funding is available, so I'm waiting to hear about that. So I'm going to be looking more generally at the story of King David, who is the David of David and Bathsheba, and how that is reflected in a certain genre of novels, which is inspirational romance. Inspirational romance is the Christian subgenre of romance novels. It was kind of created by Christians who enjoyed reading romance novels but didn't necessarily like all of the stuff that comes up in secular romance, like particularly the amount of sexual content that's in there. So that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at in my research, is where this subgenre of inspirational romance came from and how the tropes of romance novels impact the way biblical stories are retold, which is an area of research that no one's really looking into at the moment. So I wanted to get a head start on some of the reading for that, so you'll be seeing a few more books about this topic coming up in the future. This was the first, well, I say this was the first one I read. One of the books that I'm going to be researching I read a long time ago, but I'm going to be rereading that soon, and then I'm just reading through this and some of the other novels that I'm going to be looking at, and then I'm going to do another read through of them and actually take some more notes and annotate them and cross-reference them with the biblical text and stuff like that. And so that's kind of the plan for the research, but for now this was just a first read through. That's a lot of explanation about why I read the book, and now actually to what I thought about the book, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because you'll hear me talking about these books a lot, and I maybe in the autumn when I'm actually starting the research will do a whole video about what the research is and what I'm hoping to find out from it. This is a retelling of the story of David and Bathsheba from the Bible. It occurs in the book of 2 Samuel, primarily, if you're interested in that. The story is that David was the king of Israel by this point. Bathsheba was the wife of one of his military captains, and one day when all of the army are off at war and David hasn't gone with them, which kings usually should have done, he's out walking on the roof of his palace and he sees Bathsheba having a bath and sends for her and sleeps with her, and then she becomes pregnant and he has her husband killed so that he can marry her. Some of the stuff I'm going to be looking into in the research is how we understand consent in the story and whether actually Bathsheba had any choice in the matter, particularly when a lot of these novels, and there are a number of them that I'm going to be looking at, present this as a love story, as this one did. The authors try and build up like a backstory that we don't get in the biblical text to try and justify what happens within the story. Hi, okay, so my phone ran out of storage, so apologies if I haven't quite got the angle right there. I was talking about this book, David and Bathsheba. I just going to try and quickly summarise without going into too much detail about what I'm going to be researching to do with this book. Yeah, there were elements of the story that I thought were really clever, that she brought out really well, and there were some bits that I disagree with her interpretation, and so it's going to be a really interesting book to delve into and analyse in a bit more detail when I get into researching it. It's actually a really well written book compared with the one that I've just picked up, which I think is going to be a little bit less well written. I mean, I'm only a couple of chapters into that. She included parts of the story that I didn't think she was going to include, which was good, and I'm just really looking forward to digging more into this book and analysing it. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It's not a bad book. I don't entirely agree with how she presented the story in all its aspects, but I think she did explore some of the issues pretty well. That's, I think, all I'm going to say about that one now. The next book that I finished was What White People Can Do Next by M Batuba. This is non-fiction. It's very short. It's only about 150 pages. I was gifted this through the Buy a Stranger a Book Day hosted by Big Green Bookshops on Twitter, so go and follow them because they're really cool. Every week people offer to buy books for strangers, and so someone offered to buy this for me, which is very nice. I really love this cover as well. I think it's beautiful. This is a very short book, but it packs a heavy punch. It's got so much good stuff in it. If it didn't infringe copyright, I would just sit and read the whole thing to you. M Batuba talks about some of the issues with the current dialogue, particularly online, to do with cancel culture and allyship, and how actually in some aspects that can be really unhelpful and leads to a lot of performative allyship, but doesn't actually necessarily lead to a lot of structural change. So she talks a lot about how we can move past that, how we can actually engage with the issues and make some real difference. There was just a really lot of good stuff in it, and yeah, I really highly recommend it. I think it's probably the best book I've read since the Black Lives Matter movement really picked up some momentum last summer. I think this is the best book I've read about racism and allyship and what white people can actually do. Yeah, it really impacted me a lot. I gave it 5 stars. No hesitations in recommending this whatsoever. If you want to think more about these issues and what can be done to make a difference, then definitely check this one out. I thought it was really good. And the final book I'm going to be talking about today was Voyage to Venus by C.S. Lewis. This is called Perelandra as well, I think is the alternate title for it. So I picked this up. This is the second book in the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis, and I picked this up as part of the Space Trilogy read-along hosted by Victoria from A Musical Bookworm, and I will link to the live show for this book because I really enjoyed that live show. I wasn't taking part, well, I was just like watching and commenting along, but I found it really great to go into some of the issues and some of the themes of the book in a little bit more detail. So in the first book, which I talked about in my previous recent reads video, the main character, Ransom, Dr. Ransom, is kidnapped and taken to Malacandra, which is Mars, and meets the people that live there. The second book, he is taken to, or is sent to Perelandra, which is Venus, because one of the characters from the first book, one of the other human characters from the first book, is intending to go there and try and corrupt Venus, which is a new world. In this book, this was written in the 40s, so it was before we knew that Venus wasn't actually habitable. So C.S. Lewis envisions a world that is new, kind of like I said in the live show that this felt to me like a grown-up version of Narnia. It's kind of like Narnia at the beginning of its existence, and there's 2 people that inhabit the world who are called the King and the Lady. Ransom meets the lady, as does his other character Weston, and Weston is trying to corrupt this new world before it gets going, and Ransom is there to try and prevent this from happening. So this one delves a lot more into philosophy and theology than the first one did, or at least a lot more blatantly. It is written from a Christian perspective and it's quite heavy on some of the Christian themes, so if you're not too keen on those, then maybe avoid it, but I thought it was still quite a good sci-fi story. I think the story was slightly sacrificed to the themes in this book in a way that didn't happen in the first book, so I enjoyed the first book slightly more, but I really enjoyed this, and I do want to reread it because I think I read it too quickly and I need to think about some of the stuff that comes up in it a bit more, but I want to read Paradise Lost first because I have a feeling that was quite influential on C.S. Lewis's thought in this book. I've only read bits of Paradise Lost so far. We were looking at it with a group from my church and we read some excerpts of it, so I want to read that and then reread this. A criticism I've heard of this book is that bits of it are quite sexist. I didn't necessarily feel that way. I was a bit worried about reading it because of that, and that certainly there's some places where you can tell that it was written in the 40s, and you can also tell that what C.S. Lewis is trying to do is imagine the conversation in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, between Eve, the first woman, and the serpent who tricks her into eating the forbidden fruit. C.S. Lewis is telling kind of a parallel story to that. I can understand why some of what is said could be interpreted as being sexist, but I think because it was written by a confirmed bachelor in the 1940s, before we had a lot of the stuff in like the second wave of feminism that really challenged a lot of preconceptions about the female gender, I was more comfortable with it than I think some other people have been who had told me it was quite sexist. So yeah, I didn't think it was as bad as I was expecting in that sense. I suppose that is what I would say about it. There was stuff that could be interpreted as being sexist, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. It didn't detract from my enjoyment of it in that respect. In that sense, it is just a product of the time that it was written. But I quite enjoyed this. I'm really looking forward to reading the third book and to finishing off this series. I don't think I've got anything else to say about it. So that's all the books I'm going to be talking about today. I actually have no idea how long this video is now because my camera cut out halfway through, so I think it's probably long enough. So let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought about them. Let me know some of what you've been reading recently. Particularly, I'm interested actually if you've read the Space Trilogy, what you thought about Voyage to Venus or Perelandra, and about some of the themes that came out on it, because it was quite hefty in some ways. Or if you plan to read any of the books because I've talked about them, that would be really great to hear too. Or if you just want to let me know that you've been here. I've talked about quite a lot of non-fiction books in this video, so leave me... Let's go for a sciencey emoji because I talked a little bit about neuroscience and stuff like that. So let's go for a sciencey emoji that represents all the non-fiction that I read that I've talked about in this video. Please also like this video if you liked it, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on my social media. All that information is listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!